So hello Wayne, I'm your interviewer today. My name is Raewyn and we're just going to start off with a couple of questions over here. So I'll just start off with tell me about yourself and who are you and why you're here.
Good, Raewyn. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come and talk to you. So, my name is Wayne Marriott. I'm standing for the Whakatane Hopi ward for council as one of the councillors. My background is I arrived here in Whakatane in 2009 to lead the development of Te Kopeopeo, the library and the museum. So I have a background in museums, art galleries. I'm a historian by trade. So amongst all of that, that's kind of given me a bit of a toolbox that I think may be useful in terms of standing for council and some skill bases which could be useful for the future.
Cool. Alrighty. So what are you passionate about?
Oh, look, I'm passionate about history. I'm passionate about people connecting with who they are, with the past. I mean, look at the area that we're in, Kopeopeo. I mean, once the site of a famous pa. This was once the shopping centre of Whakatane. Across the road is, where you had Bob Byrne first start his trade, the former mayor of Whakatane. Beside him used to be a famous boat building place, which is now where Pack and Save is. So there is so much history and so much excitement in Whakatane that I think that the more we know about our community, the more we know about our past, means that we can actually plan for our present and also plan for our future.
Alrighty, so what is your fondest memory?
My fondest memory as a child? Eddie, fondest memory. Well, I guess for me, some of the big things which I've been involved in over the years have been the opportunities with some of the incredible people that I've worked with. I was really fortunate a number of years ago where I became part of a team that went to America. We had a look at how you preserve and present cultural history, but also find a way to have economic benefits from it. So, in other words, you can make money out of telling your stories if it's the right people who are telling those stories. And as part of that, we walked down for breakfast one morning and there was the former US Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, and it was kind of like groupie moment, and we were all like, wow, and she kind of came over, she had a conversation with us, and it was utterly brilliant to meet somebody of her ilk. Take it to the other side, I think one of the saddest but also the thing that made me quite passionate about this area was after the Edgecombe floods. I was working in the former Countdown building along the road here, as part of the Rotary team. A lady came in, she'd lost all her photos in the Edgecombe flood, didn't know what to do. And so I was the chair of a trust. We raised over $100,000 and in the end ended up copying over 150,000 photographs at no cost for all the locals out there, gave them a memory stick, and the most important thing was they had their past and they had their present so that they could be able to share it with their kids in the future, because there's nothing worse. You can replace a lounge suite, you can replace a bed, but you can't replace your photographs and your memories. And so I think that was the one thing that I guess I'm incredibly proud of leading that wonderful team of people who did that project.
That is so cool. Alrighty, so who is someone you admire or look up to?
Oh, look, there's a lot of people around that I admire, but one person who I had an opportunity to try and bring to New Zealand, but we were just a little bit too late many years ago, was a woman by the name of Rosa Parks. Now, Rosa Parks was the famous lady who refused to move her seat on a bus in America so that she actually started the civil rights movement for a lot of people in America, and we tried to bring her to New Zealand, down to Invercargill, because we had some clashes that were going on at that stage between the high schools. We couldn't get her, so I brought the second best person, who was a man called Fred Silberstein. Most people have never heard of him. He was 13 years old when he was placed in Auschwitz concentration camp.
Wow.
And he lied, he survived the selection process, and he survived three years or 4 years in Auschwitz. He was carrying bricks every day, 3 to 4 bricks and building stuff, then survived the death march and eventually made it out to New Zealand. And, the message from Fred was actually about compassion, to be able to work with everybody, to respect everybody, their cultures, where they've come from, and also to always be prepared to listen and understand. And I think he's somebody that, if you go back and have a look at, his story as a teenager is absolutely amazing. And I remember organising a public meeting. We thought we might get 10, 20 people. we had over 250 on the first night, and there was still another 150 the second night, who wanted to listen to the story of this 70, 80-year-old man at that stage, who as a 13-year-old had survived the horrors of Auschwitz concentration camp.
That is really, really cool. Alrighty, so tell me about your youth.
Well, I grew up in Ashburton, so where's that? Well, it's about an hour's drive south of Christchurch. So I came from a family. My dad worked at the local freezing works, and mum was the stay-at-home mum. I've got 2 brothers and a sister, umpteen dozen cousins, so we were kind of like this gang that always hung around with each other. I'm the eldest of all the cousins, so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. But the result is you had to be in charge of, 13 or 11 or whoever happens to be there at that stage. I was really lucky. I had 4 great-grandparents when I was born. So these guys taught me a lot about who they were, their history. My grandparents were always around. So my childhood was Ashburton. I went to school there, Ashburton College. And then when I turned 15, Granddad said to me, right, time to get a job at the freezing works. And I fought like a banshee. And the whole idea was that when you turned 15, you left school and you got yourself a job. I fought that for 2 more years and ended up going to Otago University. I did a degree in history. From there, worked for a dealer gallery and met some of the most amazing New Zealand artists, people we now study in our history books because they're dead and gone. Went off to Invercargill, where I managed the art gallery down there, and then Wellington and I was the general manager of the New Zealand museum sector. So it was an independent organisation that we kind of lobbied government and did stuff like that. Then went to Nelson, built a museum. Well, I didn't build it. Actually, my wife was the owner of the construction company that built it. I met her as part of the whole process. And then went to the Middle East, did some work there and came back to New Zealand and eventually ended up here in Whakatane. So, it's, for me, New Zealand has always been this great place. We've got great stories that we can tell. And, we all can share our experiences and have those conversations with people and make it a place that actually we want to live in. And Whakatane is one of those places.
That's so cool. Alrighty. So, if you grew up in different circumstances, do you think that would have altered your childhood and how you are now?
Well, it depends on what people call different circumstances. I mean, my mother and father, and my mother in particular, had the piece of advice: don't let anybody ever tell you you can't do something, because only you are the person who can make that decision. And I guess we were lucky that we had that as our advice. So for me, I went off to university and studied history. My sister became a hairdresser. I've got a brother in the army, and I've got another brother who's a builder. We got to do whatever we wanted to do because we were really lucky. We had parents who believed that their role was to help us and support us into doing whatever we believed and we dreamt as our dream. I know for a lot of kids, that's not the reality of what happens. And I think for many kids, and I remember as a teenager at home, I had friends who were in that situation where their parents may not have been as supportive as my parents were, and they'd often turn around, arrive at our place, plonk themselves down on the couch, do what teenagers do, sit around, talk a whole lot of rubbish, and then some of them would start talking to mum or talking to dad as the dishes were getting done, because we didn't have a dishwasher. We had 4 kids. We were called dishwashers. And they would have those conversations, and some of them I know went off to do some really interesting things, and for them it was the army, it was opportunities to switch around and change their lives. But it's hard, it's really hard, and it's even harder when you're a teenager now. And I mean, I know it was pretty awful when I was a teenager, but it's so much more difficult because, do you do this, do you do that, do I make this decision? Most people don't realise that the decisions that they make as teenagers actually follow them around for the rest of their lives. And I always say to everybody, you do what you believe and you do what you're passionate about, and just don't break the law, please. You can disagree with the law, but don't break the law. And if the law is an ass, well then tell somebody that the law is an ass and protest and make it and get it changed for the better. And we've seen examples of when the law's was wrong. And the result has been that people have protested. When I remember my first protest, I was probably about 10 years old. They built some horrendous thing in Ashburton, and so people went and protested about it. As a student, we used to protest up and down the streets at Otago instead of going to varsity. But now we've kind of lost that whole thing. We kind of protest on Facebook. Well, that's cool, but actually it's the visibility and it's the voice in the street. It's the concern, and it's the fact that you can actually awaken the social conscience, which is really important to do.
Alrighty, that's so cool. Okay, so I have another question for you. It's kind of big. So, what were your goals and aspirations when you were younger, and did you achieve them, and how?
Well, my goal and aspiration, I've achieved some of them. My biggest goal was to study history and research and do stuff like that, and I can't believe it, I actually did get to achieve that one. At varsity, I loved to debate. I was president of the university debating team for a year. I loved the whole discussion, the research, the argument, the passion that you can have, and actually that person's your friend 5 minutes later, but you're just in that adversarial role for a while. There are some things that I've still got to do on my bucket list. There are some places that I'd like to go. I still remember my first overseas trip, and I was in my 20s. We did one trip to Australia as kids, but in my 20s I headed off to Europe on a scholarship, and I was really lucky. You don't know what's out there in the rest of the world until you go somewhere else and you see it, and that's why I still say to people, if there are opportunities, take them, support them. And I look at young people nowadays, and you've got so many more opportunities than we ever had when we were kids, but it's finding a way to put you guys in connection between the opportunities that are now and how you can actually do that. And sometimes there's a big bridge that needs to be built, because you may not know the people who can make those opportunities work for you. If I still had a few more things that I'd like to do, the most boring thing that I actually love doing when I need some time out is I write names on the back of photos, because we have these things that I call the unloved and the dead photos that sit in museums and people's houses where Granny's dead, and you pick up a box of photos and you go, we don't know who they are, so they go to the Salvation Army or they get tipped out into the rubbish. That's one of the things I do. I've had paintings that I've decided I wanted to track down and find out where they were. I've done that. I've got one thing I'm doing at the moment, which is trying to research and find, and it's on the slow burn, something, a New Zealand cross, which was awarded during the New Zealand Wars to somebody who lived here locally. It went missing about 1900. We know where it is. The question is, how did it go missing and how did it end up there? And so you get to become a bit of a detective when you're a historian. So those are the type of things I do for fun, and at the same time, those are kind of the bucket list things that you keep doing.
That's so cool. I love that. Okay, so who are the youth of Kopeopeo?
Oh, the youth of Kopeopeo. Well, you can go to the Facebook thing, and it looks like everybody's somewhere around between 13 and about 30, depending on who it is. But actually, I look at the youth of Kopeopeo and I see, well, like the kids from St Joseph's walking past, you've got yourselves from Trident, you've got all the people that live here, the people that shop here, the people that work here. They're actually the voice of the area, and you're really a group of all completely different walks of lives, because when you walk down here on a Saturday morning, it's like everybody's here. Saturday morning you kind of pop into this shop and then you pop into the next shop and see what's going on, and that's where you see the youth. So I'll define them, if you want a definition of, say, a group of people probably under the age of 30, or whoever identify themselves as being young. They're people who generally live in the area, who are passionate, who hang out in this area, but also I think a group of people that now want their voice heard within the area as well. And what I've been seeing lately around here is, what's wonderful is actually the youth coming together and having those discussions, and actually not relying just on a youth council or some other form of mechanism, but but actually having their own voice and saying how they feel, what they feel about things, supporting a number of new initiatives. We've seen new groups being established here lately, like the Rainbow Youth Group. We've also seen a lot of people asking the questions about, what do we do with climate change? What do we do even about jobs, rubbish in the streets? So what we're seeing is a whole bunch of young people who are, I would say, the good rebel rousers and the ones that are pricking people's social conscience at the moment. And that is never a bad thing.
Alrighty, so what do you think it's like to be a young person in Kopeopeo?
I think it's really hard, to be honest. And I don't think it's just hard for a young person in Kopeopeo. I think it's hard for young people everywhere. If I go back to the 70s when I was a kid, we had all the films coming through the day after. It was all about nuclear warfare, and it was the fact that we knew that some idiot was going to push a button at some stage and we'd all, be zapped in 30 seconds and life was over. Now, we're in this constant reminder of climate change, and one of the things which young people in particular have got to get their head around is actually climate change and how it's affecting us, but how it's affecting even the psyche of people. And the reason I raise that is you look at, let's take, say, the group of farmers' kids that are coming into school. When you talk to a lot of those kids who are your peers, a lot of them are starting to feel really guilty about the fact that their parents are farming, they're doing this, they're making all this impact on climate change. The same is being said with even some of the local families who are shareholders through Māori land trusts and some of the farms that we have around here. There's this level of guilt that's coming through. That guilt's really not fair, because that's actually affecting the mental health of so many young people. The conversation is positive, and I think we need to have the conversation about climate change. It's just making sure, though, that we actually look after everybody at the same time and make sure they're safe in those conversations. We live in the Kopeopeo area, so I can pick on my stroppy 8-year-old. I have an 8-year-old who has an opinion. She certainly has an opinion about climate change. She has an opinion about recycling, and those opinions are being cultivated through conversations with her peers at school, through teachers, through older cousins. And I think what we need to do is really start to listen to that voice. The challenge is finding the mechanism how you actually listen to that voice. Often it used to be, well, let's put together a youth council, so you take, the bright, shiny one and you put them there in a little group. But actually, do they truly represent the voice of everybody in the community? So you do need to find a way that the voice of Kopeopeo, along with the voice of Ohopi, along with the voice of Waimana, Awakere, Matata, can all be heard and actually listened to. And I think and that's one of the reasons that I'm suggesting that council needs to change the way that they communicate. I remember many, many years ago getting to work with Bubbles Mehenui, the famous guide from Whakarewarewa.
Oh.
And she would always turn around and she'd say, whakarongo. And it's true. You have to listen. You have to zip that mouth occasionally, and you have to open those ears and actually listen and observe. And you may not agree with the perspective that's being put towards you, but if you don't listen to it and you don't give a person a fair chance to have a conversation, you're never going to progress. And that's one of the things that we've got to do. I think that's where the youth of Kopeopeo coming together, having those conversations, having those Facebook sites, doing the murals that they've been working on, having some that are a bit more stroppy than the others, some that are passionate. That's not a bad thing. That's actually what's going to make this area of town come alive again. It's what's going to make the shops full. It's what's going to make it safe for people to walk down the streets at night, and safe for those kids to walk down the streets. Hopefully that's going to be the means by which the methamphetamine dealers that we know are on the streets here in Kope, and the person selling the tinny out of the car down the road, are actually going to go. And the kids will be able to walk down the street and actually feel safe, have those conversations without knowing that somebody's going to bail them up and say, will you do X, will you do Y, here, give us this, give us that. So there are challenges, and I think those social challenges are something that council is in the best place as really like an umbrella. They can be the conduit that brings all those groups together. So you actually need the voice of the youth of Kopeopeo. You need the MSD sitting there. You actually need the police sitting at the same table. You need Ngāti Awa at the same table as well, and that wider conversation going on so that your future is actually safe and your future is secure. And you want your kids, when you have kids or if you choose to have a family in the future, you want them to be safer than you ever were walking down the street of Kope, or know that what you're doing is actually a positive impact. To make sure that it's better for future generations or future kids that start coming through school. And that's what I mean by the future generations. It's the 10 and the 12-year-olds you guys can have a direct impact on, making sure that life is going to be so much better for them. So make sure your voice is heard.
Do you recognise the different stereotypes here in Kopeopeo?
Well, that's probably one of the hardest questions, because it depends. You can have there are people who will say you've got this community, and this community that are here. I think I look at Kopeopeo, and actually there's this huge, almost international community of people who are here. I guess for me, people are people, and I've never really tended to look and say they represent this group or they represent, for example, there's a number of shopkeepers along here who have come from overseas who have set up their small businesses here. Those guys are all a part of the community. They're investing in the community, and they're a voice within the community as well. And it's those interactions which actually all make us stronger, because from their experiences and from your experiences, you actually make a much stronger and safer community and voice to be heard. Where I think we do get into trouble occasionally is when we start to box people into things and say, oh, they're from this and they're from that and they're from that. And we actually forget, well, when you cut us, we all bleed the same blood. Some of us have different backgrounds. Some of us are tangata whenua, some of us aren't tangata whenua. I think it's important that we actually acknowledge who the tangata whenua are here, and even more important, when we've got the history of past sites like Kopeopeo known about, that actually we can get down to who were the tangata whenua of this whole area in the first place. I mean, historically it's really interesting and really important. But we also have to make sure that we're working together as a community going forward, and really trying to learn and always keep an open mind about how we can share those cultural experiences with everybody else. And the longer we do that, then the better it's going to be, and the safer it will be, and the stronger we're going to become as a community.
Okay, what is it like to be a person your age in Kopeopeo?
That's a really interesting question. Well, I'm now 51, so I'm not sure whether a 51-year-old is a good or a bad thing in Kopeopeo, but it's an age that I feel very comfortable with. I mean, I still look out of my eyes and I still think I'm a crazy teenager or a 21-year-old. It's only when you run into this person that kind of looks like your father in the mirror, you think, oh, when did that happen? Look, for me, Kope is a place that we're here, we enjoy it. It's our, we just live down the road, so I mean we're part of this community, and so for me, it's an area of town I'd like to see develop. I know that I think the last time there was any real commitment put into doing up Kopeopeo was when Tony Hall, who was on the Whakatane Community Board a number of years ago, led the charge to get the money to actually do up Kopeopeo. And I think often there's a focus on the CBD of Whakatane. This is our other CBD. This is actually the original CBD.
CBD?
Oh, Central Business District.
Yes, I had that. I was asked that question before. I forgot what it
So,
was.
if you go back a large number of years ago, this was the central business district of Whakatane. So there were all the right businesses were here, people were here, they were supporting the area. Then there was a movement, there was more land reclamation going on in the Strand and around the Commerce Street area. And so the result was that some of those businesses then moved and went to other places. There's actually no reason why this place can't become exactly like it was in the 50s again, because you've got the shops, you've got the people, it's always a hell of a lot of fun.
Yeah, just a little upgrade, right?
Yeah, it just needs some investment and upgrade.
Yeah. Alrighty, so do you think the council could improve the situation of Kopeopeo?
Oh, absolutely. It's a case of have the conversation with the community, the youth voice of Kopeopeo, bring all those groups together and actually work out a plan together. Instead of somebody coming in and actually telling you what you have to have, how about they come in and actually have a conversation, not an email, but actually a real conversation, and find out what the young people, what the business owners, what the people who live on the streets actually want to see happen here, and how we can make Kopeopeo the gem it used to be back in the 50s and 60s again.
That's so cool. Alrighty, so what do people say about Kopeopeo, and what do you say about Kopeopeo?
Well, Kopeopeo has some of the best second-hand shops in Whakatane, so I'm actually a bit of a, we've got to have these places. It's our local supermarket. It's our local fruit and veg shop. It's all the other stuff. So for us, it's the place where we come and we actually do our shopping. So it's the local place for us. I know there's a lot of comments and conversations about Kopeopeo around town. Some are positive, some are negative. But actually, instead of people making those assumptions, I actually think there are a lot of people that actually need to leave some parts of Whakatane and actually come and experience Kopeopeo and actually have lunch here, walk down the street, do some shopping here, because you can choose to ignore Kopeopeo if you want to, but actually I don't think people should be. They need to come, be part of the community, embrace the community, and actually realise that we live in this amazing district where all parts are equally valid, and we have to support all parts of the community.
At night time, do you feel threatened at all when you come here at night?
No, I don't. Hey, look, I'm a grumpy 51-year-old walking down the street with going between X and Y, so no, I don't feel threatened at night when I come down the street. I mean, I see a lot of people that I know when I'm walking down the street here. Some of the homeless people I know, so it's just a wave and a hi and how are you as you're wandering down doing what you need to do. So it's up to you. You can kind of clutch your pearls and hide behind the window of the car if you want to, but actually just get out there and be part of the community, have a conversation with people in the community, and no, for me, I'm not threatened.
Alrighty, so another question is, what do you think the young people of our area want our decision makers to know about them?
That they have a voice that is real and a voice that is valid and a voice that needs to be listened to. And the most important thing is don't give lip service to the young people, actually give them the opportunity to have a real voice.
That's cool, thank you. Alrighty, so what do you think our young people feel should be important to our decision makers?
The ability to actually interact with the decision makers, that the decision makers actually respect the concerns of young people, they don't dismiss those concerns, and by doing that you will actually be acknowledged, and your vision and your dreams will be made into reality.
That's cool. And last but not least, final question, do you think it's important for everyone to vote?
Absolutely. I mean, we're so lucky. We live in a democratic country, and we're in a society where every vote counts. And so the most important thing that people do is actually get out there. They open those envelopes when they arrive in their letterbox, make sure they tick those boxes for who they want to represent them and who they believe is the best possible person to be their voice at the council table. That's always the hardest thing, because sometimes, because we're a small community, it's your mates who may be running. Sometimes we know your mates aren't possibly the right people. Other times it may be the person you think, I don't agree with you most of the time, but actually they may be the best advocate. So the challenge is about making the decision, weighing up the pros and cons of all the candidates, and choosing the person who's best for you, that you feel will represent you best in terms of the voice of the community and council.
That's cool. Alrighty, thank you so much,
You're
Wayne.
welcome. Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
time.